Imagine a luxury expedition at the end of the world. In April 2026, the MV Hondius set sail from the southern tip of Argentina, carrying 150 souls toward the pristine silence of Antarctica and the remote islands of the Atlantic. For the passengers, it was a voyage of a lifetime, a retreat into the purest air on the planet. But an invisible predator had already boarded with them. 5 days into the journey, a 70-year-old Dutch passenger developed what seemed like a common chill, a mild fever, a slight headache. Within days, his lungs began to fail, and on April 11th, he died in the middle of the ocean. This was not a typical outbreak. As the ship moved toward the coast of Africa, more passengers collapsed. A German woman died just 4 days after her first symptoms appeared. Panic began to ripple through the decks as the world realized that isolation, once a form of safety, had become a trap. The culprit was eventually identified as the Andes virus, a member of the Hantavirus family so lethal that it carries a mortality rate of nearly 50%. There was no vaccine, no antiviral cure, and for those on the Hondius, there was nowhere to run. What Hantavirus does to a human body is a masterpiece of biological deception. It enters the system silently, often inhaled as microscopic particles from dried rodent waste. Once inside, it doesn't immediately attack. It bypasses the throat and nose, heading straight for the deep architecture of the lungs to find the endothelial cells, the delicate lining of your blood vessels. For up to 8 weeks, it remains a sleeper cell, replicating invisibly without alerting the immune system. You feel fine. You go to work, you visit friends, and you breathe deeply, unaware that your vascular system is being quietly compromised. When the symptoms finally arrive, they mimic a common flu: fever, muscle aches, and fatigue. But the real horror begins in phase 2. Your immune system suddenly wakes up and realizes it is under siege, and its response is a catastrophic overcorrection known as a cytokine storm. In its frantic attempt to kill the virus, your own body attacks the lining of your blood vessels. The capillaries in your lungs begin to leak plasma. Your lungs don't fill with the virus, they fill with your own blood's fluid. You aren't just struggling to breathe, you are quite literally drowning from the inside out. While most hantaviruses are a dead end once they reach a human, the Andes strain identified on the cruise ship plays by a more terrifying set of rules. It is the only hantavirus known to be capable of person-to-person transmission. In the cold, unventilated cabins of a ship at sea, this rare ability turned a localized infection into a multi-country crisis. Scientists have documented superspreaders within this strain, individuals who can pass the virus to dozens of others through close, prolonged contact. The incubation period is a ticking clock that can last for over a month, meaning a passenger could disembark, fly across the globe, and return home before they even realize they are a carrier. This is exactly what happened as passengers from the Hondius scattered towards South Africa, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. The world watched as medical evacuation flights landed in Europe, carrying patients in specialized isolation units, while the ship itself was turned away from ports, a ghost vessel searching for a place to dock. To understand how we reached this point, we have to look back to the high deserts of the American Southwest. In 1993,
a mysterious illness began striking down young, healthy members of the Navajo Nation in the Four Corners region. They were dying of sudden respiratory failure, with a staggering 75% mortality rate.
While modern medicine was baffled, the tribal elders already knew the cause. Their oral history had recorded a pattern for centuries. When the rains are heavy, the piñon pine trees produce a bumper crop of nuts. This explosion of food causes the deer mouse population to skyrocket. More mice meant more virus in the environment. Science eventually caught up, identifying the sin nombre virus, a strain carried by the seemingly harmless deer mouse. It was a revelation that Hantavirus wasn't just a relic of the Korean War, where it was first named after the Hantan River. It was a permanent resident predator of the American wilderness.
The danger isn't limited to the deep desert. It thrives in the places we go to escape. In 2012, the pristine beauty of Yosemite National Park became a kill zone. Visitors staying in the popular Curry Village were unknowingly breathing in death. The park had installed tent cabins with double walls, which became the perfect hidden nesting grounds for deer mice. When guests moved their luggage or opened windows, they disturbed the dust, launching aerosolized viral particles into the air. 10 people were infected and 3 died, simply because they had spent a night in a rustic cabin. This highlights the most dangerous paradox of the virus. The cleaner and more pristine the landscape appears, the more it might suit the carrier.
The risk isn't in the crowded cities. It's in the quiet rural properties, the seasonal cabins, and the outbuildings, where the dust has been allowed to settle and the rodents have been allowed to rule. As we move deeper into 2026, researchers are noticing a disturbing shift. Hantavirus is no longer staying within its historical boundaries. Cases are appearing in states like Nevada and Wisconsin, places with almost no history of the disease. In Argentina, the virus has moved from the remote south into the heavily populated agricultural belts near Buenos Aires. The reason for this expansion is written in the stars and the oceans. NASA is now using satellite imagery to track greenness pulses from orbit, measuring how vegetation surges after heavy rainfall. By monitoring temperature shifts in the Pacific Ocean, the El Niño Southern Oscillation, scientists can predict a hantavirus outbreak a full year before the first human falls ill. They are watching the Pacific warm, knowing that it will trigger a chain reaction. More rain, more seeds, more mice, and eventually, more deaths. We are entering an era where a weather pattern in the ocean can weaponize the very ground we walk on thousands of miles away. Hantavirus may not be the next global pandemic in the way we think of the flu, but it is a permanent, evolving threat that turns our desire for isolation into a vulnerability. In a world that is constantly changing, the silent predator of the wild is simply waiting for us to disturb.